Hey everyone, this week I want to talk to you about people pleasing. I have talked about people pleasing and the ideas behind people pleasing as a tangent in other posts and in other videos that I've created, but we've never exclusively focused on the idea of people pleasing. And I want to start with a radical way to think about people pleasing. People pleasing is lying. People pleasers are liars, and I'm including myself in this when I people please. Because people pleasing is the act of considering first what other people want or what we want other people to think about us before we consider our own truth, our own wants, and our own desires and our own design of our path that we want for our lives. So when we people please, there are a couple of different things that could be going on. It could be that we've considered someone else's opinion or someone else's desires more important than our own. And it could be that we are acting from a place of trying to engineer someone else's thoughts about us. I want you to think a certain way about me, and so I'm going to act out of alignment with my own integrity in order to try to manipulate you to have good thoughts about me. And we're taught to do this from a really early age. There are all these ways that people-pleasing just kind of seeps in our society. There's this idea of social obligation, that we attend events even when we don't want to, even if they're not valuable to us or in line with our priorities, because they're expected. And if we don't go, other people might think a certain way about us. There are all kinds of other examples, and you probably have your own that you've developed or that come into play in your life now, or that you can remember the messages that you internalized as you were growing up. That we should focus on what other people will think before we tap into what we want and what is true for us. And this is really, really dangerous. And it seems so innocent. It seems so wonderful. Well, I care about what other people think and I want them to be happy. But here's the truth. We don't engineer other people's thoughts. That's their responsibility. And when we show up in relationships by not checking in with ourselves about what we want and by focusing on trying to manipulate what someone else thinks about us, what we're presenting to the world is a fake version of us. And so what we're doing, I want you to really hear this, if this is true for you. What we're doing is we're saying, here is someone who I am not, so that you will like this person that I'm not. And it's so detrimental to our own integrity with ourselves. And before I thought about people pleasing this way, and before I was introduced to thought work and started doing thought work regularly, I would never have self-described as a people pleaser. I would have said, absolutely not. I really know what I want. I always say what I want. And then I started noticing all of these places where, especially where this came up for me, was noticing that in conversations with certain people, especially people that I perceived to be in a position of authority, I would try to figure out exactly what their end goal was and present the version of me that I thought met what they were looking for. And I realized all of these places that I was, in fact, people-pleasing. That instead of just checking in with what was real for me, what was true, what felt clean and clear and light, asking the questions that I wanted to ask about really, all of the places where I had questions, or presenting my ideas in a way that was about what was true for me and what my real observations were, that wasn't happening because I was inside someone else's head wondering what version of me would create good thoughts for them about what I was bringing to the table. And what this does to us is it does two things that I think are really, really harmful. It makes us stop asking ourselves first what we really want. So sometimes when we're people-pleasing, it's not about self-abnegation. It's just about first focusing on someone else's desires before asking ourselves the question, what do I want? What's true for me right now? And when we don't ask ourselves that question over and over again, we don't have access to our own wisdom, to our own knowledge, to our own, some people call it a gut. I don't like to call it that. I just think we know what we want and what is right for us. And we know it more and more and better, and we become more and more proficient at designing our own lives when we're checking in with ourselves regularly about what we want and why. The other thing that it does is it just, and I've talked about this so many times, if you follow anything that I do or write or all the videos that I make, that it puts us in a place that we don't control. When I'm trying to manipulate someone else's thoughts about me, I am inside their head, which I have no power over. I only have control over my own wants, desires, thoughts, feelings, actions. And when I am within that realm of control, I'm really clear and centered. And when I'm outside it, it feels kind of crazy making because I'm trying to rein in something that I have no power over. And so what I came to when I discovered these areas that I was people pleasing and when I started to do thought work on it was that I would so much rather someone have negative thoughts about the real me and not like that person than have positive thoughts about a version of me that wasn't authentic. And so when I started showing up that way, what I discovered is actually, just like always, that I just felt better. I was in line with my own integrity. I was saying what was true for me. I was asking my real questions and sharing my real ideas. And I was open to just allowing other people to think whatever they think, which they're going to do anyway. And some people, when I talk to them about this idea of stopping people pleasing, they have these ideas in their head about what they will become if they stop thinking about what other people think. That suddenly they will become mean, or they won't be considerate, or they'll get lazy because they'll say no when someone asks them to take on another project. And you can read my blog this week, if you would like to, for some examples of how that plays out. But the bottom line is that that's just not true. That's a thought error that your brain is giving you. When we decide to be in line with our own integrity and stand for what we want and be true to ourselves, we don't suddenly become jerks because that's not who we are. We don't suddenly become lazy because that's not who we are. We just become us. And we stop wasting the energy trying to imagine who everyone around us wants us to be, and we just be. And then the people that are so into the person that we are around us all the time. And the people that have negative thoughts about us or aren't like so into us, they just aren't around, and that's okay. So people pleasing is one of those things where we're just eroding our own relationship to ourselves over time. And I think, what I discovered for myself was that I was doing this in places that I didn't know. I was also, true to myself in a lot of ways, and in a lot of places in my life. And in the places where I stopped focusing on other people's thoughts and feelings and really kept my control in my sphere of influence, I just opened up so much. So if this is something that you do someplace in your life, in this week's blog, I share a couple of tips for a way to just kind of change that behavior, for a couple of ways to change that behavior. And you can read those there. And I hope to see you soon, and I'll see you next week.